I can't think of many more things in life that are more challenging than when you've been falsely accused of something. And I mean that literally. When the accusation someone makes about you is absolutely not true. It's even worse when that false accusation cost you something in your career, in your relationships, in your friendships, whatever it may be. And you're standing there in a state of shock, wondering where in the world such an accusation could ever come from, or how someone could ever accuse you of something when you know that you are completely innocent. Well, in this video, I'm going to talk about what you should do when you've been falsely accused, because I've had that situation in my life in a major way. It was probably about 13, 14 years ago when I was working at a particular place, and I'd had a meeting scheduled with a colleague at a certain time on a Monday morning. And so when I came into the office and went to her office, she wasn't there. And I looked at the lady who shared an office with her, and I said, is she out of the office in the restroom or something? She said, no, she didn't feel well this morning, and she called in and is not going to be here. And I said, oh, okay. And in jest, in joviality, I said, I've been waiting for this meeting. I can't believe she didn't call me and tell me that she wasn't coming in today. I ought to just fire her. And I laughed, and the lady laughed. Everyone that worked in that place knew me as a jovial character. They knew that I was always lighthearted and that I had said similar things before, just kidding around. The fact of the matter is I didn't have the authority to fire this particular woman, even if I wanted to. And I didn't want to. She was a friend, a colleague, and someone that had helped me in a lot of ways within the company, and I had also helped her. So there was no reason for anyone to assume that I was being even remotely serious. However, the next morning when I came back into the office, I was summoned into the office by a manager one level above me, and he told me that I was going to be terminated. And I said, for what? I said, for what? He said, you threatened to fire a colleague. And I said, that was a joke. I was kidding around. I've known this lady for 13 years. I wouldn't threaten her that way. It was just a joke. I was just kidding around. And I said, let's get the other lady and bring her in here. He said, she's the one that said that you said you were going to fire her. And then when I started to try to explain the situation, he just stopped me and said, there's nothing more to say. You're done. Get all your things and get out. And they literally blocked me from being even on the campus of the facility that I work for. And I was in a state of absolute shock. And that's what happens when someone falsely accuses you of something. One of the first things that happens to you is that you're just taken off guard by it. It's a state of shock for you. And I was spinning, trying to figure out how I could recover from it. And I started talking to some of my other colleagues, and they just wouldn't even return my phone calls, respond to my text messages, emails, or anything. And at that point, I felt ganged up on and totally alone. And so later on, I had another meeting. I was called back in for another meeting with another higher up. And I thought, well, this will be my chance to tell my story. And yet again, the same thing happened. I was just told that I was out of line for doing that. And they were getting all the documentation necessary to get me out of there and to give me a severance package for a while. And again, I begged him to listen to my side of the story, and he just wouldn't. He just wouldn't let me say a word. And that's when I began to wonder if there was anything more going on than this actual accusation, as though they were just using this. Because the truth of the matter is I was going through a bad season in my life at that time personally. And I was down in the dumps a lot, but not when I came to work. I did my work as well as ever. Now, some of my friends that I worked with picked up on the fact that I was down in the dumps, and I didn't always have the best attitude at that time, but who does when you're going through a tough situation? And I had been at that company at that time right at 15 years. And I just assumed that since I'd seen other colleagues go through bad times and we didn't terminate them, I didn't make a display of it. Sometimes it came up in conversation with some of my colleagues, which I think is very normal, but it didn't affect my ability to do my work whatsoever. So at that point, I had to make a decision. As I knew I was going to not recover from it, I wasn't going to get anyone to listen to my side of it. And there was nothing I could do. So I made a decision at that time to do three things that I want to encourage you to do when you have been falsely accused of something and you know that you've been falsely accused of it. And the first thing that you want to do is just determine that you're not going to strike back at these people. And that is your first inclination, is that when someone falsely accuses you of something and you know you're not guilty, and you know that it's just something that they have just made up, or they've blown something way out of proportion, like they did in my case, your first inclination is to strike back. And our company was affiliated with thousands of people, and I was well known by hundreds and hundreds of colleagues outside of the company that knew me through our company and through social media endeavors. And I could have easily gone and sat at my computer and gone on social media and bashed the daylights out of the company and everyone involved. And at first, that's what I was going to do. I actually sat down at the keyboard and was getting ready to start my attack when something dawned on me. Something came to mind. And it's a biblical thing. And if you're not a biblical person, I go with this analogy anyway. But I remember it came to me that Jesus, when he was before his accusers, chose to remain silent. And no matter what they said to him, he just remained silent. And I felt a strong inclination as a person who follows Jesus, as a person who tries to live by the scripture, but that's what I should do. I should live like that, to the point, even in the most difficult times, that I should just not strike back, even though I wanted to. Something else came to my mind, was that Jesus also said, when someone slaps you on one cheek, turn to them the other and let them whack you again. Even though our first inclination is to smack them back, and take them to the mat, so to speak, and just beat the daylights out of them. And then another thing came to me, and that was that the scripture also teaches that as much as it's up to you, be at peace with all men. And so at that time, I just decided that I knew that going on the attack wouldn't help. It would make things worse. It would accelerate it. I might even lose the severance that they were offering me. But I figured that if anyone was going to pay a price for it, it wouldn't be them. It would be me. And so I just decided at that point to not strike back. I just decided to turn the other cheek, to be at peace as much as it's up to me, and to just be silent. And at that point, I never discussed anything else with any of them again. I just totally stopped communicating. And then a month or so later, I was called in to the office for the final severance. And I was sitting in that office, and the president of the company was sitting across his desk, and he started talking to me, and he was laying out their rationale for letting me go. And as I was listening to it, I was saying, what a crock of nonsense this is, that this didn't happen, that this is a made up poppycock. And I was sitting there, and my immediate manager up above me, the one that I had first met with, he was sitting over there. And then on this side of me was a friend of mine, one of my colleagues, who I don't even know why he was in there, but he had his job because I recommended him all those years ago. He had been at the company maybe 1 year less than I was. And he sat there in silence as these accusations were being made against me. And at no point, this man who was employed at this company because of my efforts and my recommendation, at no point did he ever raise his hand and say, This is a crock. This is Tony. We know him very well. He's been a vital part of our organization for over a decade. This is nonsense. But no, he didn't. He just sat there in silence and let this happen. And I never said a word. And when it was all over, I just got up and walked out. And as I was walking out to go through the offices and out to my car, this friend of mine followed me, or this so-called friend of mine followed me out. He wanted to follow me to my car and tell me how sorry he was that this was happening, and how he wished that we could work something out. And I just stopped him. And I said, the only thing I'm going to say to you, the only thing I'm going to say, and this is the last thing I'm ever going to say to you, is that you could have stood up for me. You have your job because of me, and you know this isn't true. You know it's not. You know that I was kidding around with what I said. You know it as well as anybody else does. I said, so the best thing for you to do is just leave me alone, because that's what I'm going to do with you and this company. I'm going to leave you alone, and I'm going to leave. And that's what I did. So step number one is don't strike back. Just resist the temptation. It'll only hurt you. Number two, the second thing you do is do some honest introspection. Look deep inside yourself at what happened that caused someone to falsely accuse you. And take the opportunity to ask yourself, is there anything that I did that would cause them, a reasonable person, to actually conclude that I did this? Is there anything at all that I did that would cause, again, a reasonable person to conclude that, yeah, you're guilty, you did that? Just be honest with yourself. See, when I look back over it, and I've revisited this thing thousands of times in my mind over the decade or so since it's been that happened, thousands of times it's popped in my head, and I've relived it. I've relived that conversation countless times. And I know, and the lady knows that I was speaking to, that I was kidding. Anybody that was standing there would have known that if anyone else was standing there. I had to do some honest evaluation, and the only thing that would even remotely cause someone to assume that I was serious was for them to think that I was serious when I said it. But anyone that knew me knew that I tended to be jovial like that. Anyone that knew me knew that that was not true. So I want to encourage you, if you've been falsely accused, or if you've ever been falsely accused, to do some honest self-introspection and say, maybe I did something. Maybe they took it a different way. And if that proves to be the case, then maybe you might want to approach that person and see if you can't work it out. But if you've truly been falsely accused, that means that you didn't do anything, and it's unjust. But you know whether or not you actually are guilty or not. And if you're not, then be at peace with it. And that should be the end of it. So number one, don't strike back. Number two, do some honest introspection. And then number three, and this is probably the most difficult of them, and that is just to let it go. Let it go. It will eat away at you and eat away at you and eat away at you. At first, when this was happening to me in the 6 months of my severance package, it just ate at me, and it kept me from moving on. It kept me from making decisions that would help my career and help better me. I allowed it to eat away at me, and finally, just through some time of honest self-evaluation and just looking at myself and looking at the fact that I was only hurting myself by reliving it, I finally just gave myself permission to let it go. And I was reminded, as I was thinking about this point, there was a movie in the Indiana Jones series called Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And in the final scenes of that movie, there Indiana and his dad are trying to chase after that golden cup, and it had fallen down into a ravine, and everything was collapsing around them, and Sean Connery was playing Indiana Jones' dad, and the cup was right there, and Indiana Jones was reaching for it, trying to get it down in that ravine, but he had fallen over into the ravine, and his dad was holding him by just one hand, and they were both sweating. His hand was slipping, and Indiana Jones said, "Yeah, but it's right there. I can get it. I can get it." And he was trying to get it, and his dad said, I'm losing my grip. I'm going to drop you. You're going to die." And he kept trying to get the cup, and finally his dad said, "Indiana, Indiana." And then Harrison Ford looked up at his dad. Indiana Jones looked up at his dad, and his dad said, "Let it go. Let it go." And what he meant by that was, your life is far more important than that cup. Even though that cup would have made him a very wealthy man and a very much increase his celebrity, he said, "Let it go." And he did. He turned and grabbed his dad's hands, and he was lifted out to safety. And that's what I want to say to you. If you've been falsely accused and you know it's false, just let it go. The only person that you're hurting is yourself. Just let it go. I've completely let it go. I don't talk to those people anymore. I don't reach out to them, even though they're still on, some of them, not all of them, some of them are still on my Facebook friends list. I never reach out to them. I never look on their pages. I don't want anything to do with any of them. I wish them well. I don't have any hard feelings, but my season of relationship with them is closed. I don't hate them. I wish them all well, but I don't need them in my life anymore. I don't need their approval. I don't need to know what they're doing. I don't need to look on their social media to see what they had for dinner last night or what their vacation was. I've just let that chapter of my life go, and I've moved on, and I'm better for it. And you'll be better for it too. Just let it go. So this is what you do when you've been falsely accused. Don't strike back. Do some honest self-evaluation, and finally, let it go. Hopefully this has been encouragement to you, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video.